Good morning, America, and welcome to this morning's huddle brought to you by Going on Offense. My name is Darrell Moon, and I'll be your host today. Thank you for being with us, and we hope you'll join the conversation today. We have a wonderful guest panelist with us to talk about the current trends and the future directions of wellness. We're holding these huddles in an effort to support those struggling, whether that be emotionally, economically, or physically, to brainstorm strategies to help, to promote resources, and to engage collaboration. That introduced today's guest. It's my pleasure to introduce to you my friend Jared Hansen, the Population Health Manager at Morton & Company. I'm going to invite Jared to take 4 or 5 minutes to introduce himself and share a comment or two about today's topic. But before I do, I want to invite you to participate in today's conversation. Would love to include you in the conversation, so either raise your hand on your control box and I'll turn on your microphone and you can actually join the conversation through audio, or if you've got a comment or a question you'd like to share, please feel free to do that through the question section on the control box. So now, Jared, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Darrell, and thank you for inviting me to be on this show. Very flattering. I've watched many of the previous episodes, and I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I have loved the content so far. So as Darrell said, my name is Jared Hansen. I'm the Population Health Manager for Morton & Company. A little bit about myself. I've been in the corporate wellness industry for about 15 years now. I've worked within a company, helping them build their wellness program. I've also worked for medical carriers, helping to service their clients. I received my education from the University of Utah in kinesiology and nutrition, and then I did my graduate work at Johns Hopkins in healthcare analytics. As far as what we do as a company, for Morton & Company, we're a 110-year-old broker. We do benefits and property and casualty insurance. I work, of course, on the benefits side, working with our clients to help build and maintain wellness programs to address a lot of those issues. My major role is to work with our analytics team and our underwriting team to make sure that we are analyzing the healthcare spend of companies and making sure that the things that are costing companies the most money when it comes to healthcare for their employees, if there are behaviorally related issues within a plan, that's where me and my team step in. We want to make sure that if there are groups like yours, Darrell, if there are solutions out there that companies can utilize to decrease that spend and take better care of their employees, that we know what those are and that we're helping those employers to provide that to their employees the best way possible. It is an ever-changing industry. It's an ever-changing world. We know that now. And that's something I think that companies' major prediction right here is it's already been a major issue already, but that's something that companies are going to take more seriously now than they ever have before. I'm excited to speak about 2 major avenues today and address those and talk with you about them. Number one is from the employer side. What are employers facing as far as wellness and moving forward in a new type of a world? You know, it may go back to normal to some degree, but I don't know if it will ever be the same because we have exposed our weaknesses as individuals and as companies, and we're really hurting from those. The other avenue that I think is really important to address is from the individual perspective. You know, whether that be from an employee perspective or just my own personal health and wellness. How do I take care of myself when gyms are limiting themselves, when produce is difficult to attain at the grocery store, when I don't want to go out as often as I did before? So those are the 2 major issues that I think are worth discussion, and I'm excited to talk about those.
Great. Before we jump into those specifically, Jared, share with us your passion and what got you interested in population health. What was the driver behind your career choice?
That's a great question. And, you know, that I'm going to have to take it kind of personal on that one, because I think for everybody, your passion is personal. I was diagnosed with cancer about 10 years ago, and I wasn't taking care of myself as good as I thought I should be. I was probably in the best shape of my life, but only physically. And when that hit, I started to question what more is there that I could be doing to take care of myself? And what lessons can I take from this and help other people in the grandest scale possible? And what better way to do it than via the employer? So, you know, I'm cancer free, and I'm passionate about what I do, and I want to make sure that the tools and resources for individuals, no matter what they're facing, that they're out there and that people are aware of them.
Great. Well, let's start with the individual and then move to employers. Talk just a little bit about what resources you see out there. Maybe on a personal level, what are you doing and your family through this pandemic?
Boy, you know, that's a rough question. I don't think I'm doing enough, but I don't know many people that feel like they are. You know, with the local gyms closed, you know, I used to go to the gym quite often, and I don't as much anymore. Personally, and I know that this is a personal choice, and I do respect those who choose to do that, but I'm still a little bit weary to go to those public places.
Mm-hmm.
We've really taken it, in my home, we've really taken it upon ourselves to cook more. And, you know, you can only eat so many microwave burritos and quick things before you don't feel good, and you know, quick and easy isn't good anymore. And, you know, I'm not perfect, and I don't think that eating perfect makes you healthy per se. I think it's a balance, but we've really taken it upon ourselves to go for walks as a family, to spend more time outside. You know, even if it is just us. And you know, I've actually set up, it's in my office here at home, but I've got a home gym that I've really started to put together better, because it's really the only option.
Nice. What resources, from your standpoint as a population health manager, are there that maybe people aren't aware of? What are some of the things you've come across that you might be willing to share or are able to share?
Sure, absolutely. You know, I think that this is something that people are aware of, that are out there, but they're not necessarily engaging as much as they want to. We're moving to a very digital world, and I think apps are kind of the one thing that we would look at in the past and say, I don't want to do personal training on an app. I don't want to sit all day and stare at my phone. In fact, you know, one of the challenges that we've created at Morton & Company is to stay away from your phone and put it down for a while. And now some of the best resources we have are online and via your app. I've noticed that a lot of gyms are doing one-on-one virtual trainings. I've also noticed that there's a lot of mom and pop shops, you know, those smaller gyms that will limit the amount of people that are there, and do either one-on-one sessions or very small group sessions. And I think those resources are fantastic. And that would include not just the physical side, but many of those other areas, such as nutrition and, you know, cooking apps and stress relieving apps, mindful meditation, those type of things, I think are some of the best tools that we have. One of the things that we've used quite a bit, in fact, I purchased a Zoom membership so that my wife and I could double date with some of our friends. That we weren't going to go out to a restaurant, and we weren't going to, you know, invite them over and have a barbecue, which would be wonderful. But we started to do Zoom dates with them, and we would play games and have conversations, and I think those tools are priceless at this moment.
Yeah, no, we've had a lot of those suggestions on past titles to really take advantage of platforms like Zoom or GoToMeetings or Google Hangouts or so many different ones to still do things together, just do it remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been some very creative ideas. I have not heard of the double date. That's a great idea as well.
Yeah, they've been fun.
I've heard some families have said, well, we're all going to have the same meal. We're all going to prepare the same meal, and then we're all going to jump on Zoom and talk about kind of having a reunion together and talk about what the meal was like. So let's move into employers. That's your area of expertise. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing employers are doing, and maybe even some of the wellness companies and insurance companies and healthcare providers. What are you seeing the industry doing to respond to the needs of the community based on the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting to see at first, you know, March, April time, businesses started to panic a little bit, especially from the wellness industry. You know, we had many events that we had planned over the summer and the fall that have been either canceled or postponed. But that doesn't change the need for employers to get those messages across and to provide those resources to their employees. And so we did. We even felt a sense of panic a little bit in the way that, how do we deliver this information? And I feel like the community, from the vendor perspective, from the employer perspective, from the insurance provider perspective, have really stepped up their game. They've taken the resources that they've developed and they've moved a lot of them to the digital realm and the digital field. With such as your program, you've been doing 3 times a week, providing these conversations that I can join from my home and educate myself and listen to professionals in different fields. I've noticed that has been a common trend throughout the industry from all sides. From the employer perspective, employers are starting, I would say they've already been involved in this for a while, but I feel like they're starting to take the health issues a little bit more seriously. We noticed that immediately when a large portion of employees go home, that we start to face other types of issues. A common one, and I think one of the things that has been on our minds from a broker and an employer perspective, is mental health. And as we deal with these issues, it's not as easy to notice that difference. I mean, personally, you start to, I think it's the opposite of being homesick. You're sick for
social
interaction and exercise and things like that you didn't necessarily realize. And you find by the time you're done with the day, you get up and you walk out of your home office, that you're exhausted and you don't want to do anything, and you feel burned out almost.
Yeah.
But you haven't done anything all day. And I think that after a couple of months, that really takes a toll on you. And I think that there is a huge gap in the industry between doing just fine and catastrophic mental breakdown. And that area needs to be addressed. And employers and vendors and companies, wellness companies, are looking for solutions to gap that space that very few have addressed. Preventive, as far as the programs aimed at preventing these type of issues. We've had prevention for heart disease and diabetes, and there are programs that have been around and they're being developed. But as far as that mental health space is concerned, that's not an area that has a lot of activity going on.
Well, and would you agree that it's not just the solutions, but it's also the employer's focus on promoting those solutions? Take, for example, employee assistance programs. They're out there, they've been out there for years and years, and yet often employers aren't promoting them a lot. There's very small utilization. What are some things you're seeing that employers are beginning to do to really encourage, or EAPs that are doing things to encourage more usage of preventive mental health solutions and strategies?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because that is actually something that we worked with one of our clients to do. That interest has grown. How do we promote that EAP? You know, if we start having these instances of mental breakdowns and people feeling stressed and cooped up in their own homes and worried about coming to work, how do they promote that? Well, you know, hey, guess what? As an employer, we've offered an EAP program for the last 15 years. Just give them a call. I didn't know we had an EAP. You know, a lot of employees don't know that. Typical percentage of participation or engagement in an EAP program is around 3% of your employees per year. And that 3%, interestingly enough, could all be the same person, because an EAP program, they're completely de-identified. The only thing that they ever report to employers is how many times people called, not how many people called. So we've been working with a lot of our clients. We've put together some promotional materials to help people learn about it. Here's the phone number. Here's the things you can call about. Here's their specialties. We had a group pretty recently that wanted to think outside the box, and they had allocated a certain amount of dollars for their wellness program. And so what they did is they said, hey, if you call your EAP or if you call your telehealth, we will give you a gift card and we will pay you back for any copay that you had to pay to utilize that service. So there are some companies really thinking outside the box and trying to not only promote it, but to reward for that type of utilization.
You mentioned that the average utilization is about 3%. Let's talk a little bit about the percentage of need. Now, I saw a report that was done a year ago. I think it was by Mindshare Partners, and this was before the pandemic, that said that 60% of workers in America experience significant mental health conditions throughout the year, any year, such that it affects their job. Well, with 60%, this is before the pandemic, with 60% of the people having needs and only 3% using prevention, we have a huge disconnect. And I'm only going to guess that now with the pandemic, those numbers certainly haven't gone down.
No, definitely not. And I can only imagine that that number is even higher. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 80 to 90%, because I think to some degree we all feel it. I think what the problem is and has always been with mental health is the stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
There's stigma. There is a process that I need to go through. If I'm going to pick up that phone and I'm going to call and schedule, whether it be a virtual or an in-person appointment with a counselor or a psychiatrist, there is a process. You know, many people don't want to admit that that's an option, that that's something that they need. You know, we live in a world where the word resilience is misinterpreted in a lot of times. Resilience is very misinterpreted in the sense that people will say, oh, well, I'm stressed, and they'll tell their spouse or they'll tell their friend, and the response they'll get is, well, I just need to get over it. You know, I just need to move on. I had a bad day. I just need to, you know, tomorrow will be better. And then they find vices and they find unhealthy ways of dealing with that stress. And the answers are out there. That, you know, the counselor's there and they're not going to be judgmental. But that stigma, there's so much attached to it. You know, you go to work and it's a rare occasion that you hear someone say, oh yeah, my counselor told me that I need to de-stress in different ways. And you know, I hear it more, but it's still not enough. You know, I think we need to destigmatize mental health. I met with one of the leaders up at the University of Utah, and one of the things that they said that was really, really interesting to me was, you know, if we have if I have issues with my stomach, then I go see a doctor. If I have issues with my foot, I go see a podiatrist. If I have mental health issues, don't I need to go see someone for my brain? You know, my brain is an organ just like the rest of me. And
probably the most important.
Right, and if it was treated a little bit less like, you know, oh, you know, hey, you're a little crazy, you okay? You know, what's wrong? it's more of a, oh, you saw your counselor? That's great. How do you feel? You know,
Yeah.
if it was treated a little differently, I think people would utilize it more. People would accept it more. That 3% could go way up, you know, and I hope to see that change over the future.
Well, that's one of my passions is to see that change. On the Going on Offense website, we've shared some statistics because one of the reasons we really have launched this is to address the emotional challenges that people are facing right now because of the pandemic in so many areas. Well, some of the just startling statistics that we've shared, and that when I came across, I went, wow, but people on average wait 10 years after symptoms begin before they reach out for help. And like 57% of all people never reach out for help. That's a problem. Being able to get people to overcome the stigmas associated, helping people to feel like it's more normal. I mean, that's a big task, and it's something we have to address. I will share with you something I read just this morning in a news article, and maybe we can chat about this for a second. It said, if, as most experts believe, an effective vaccine won't be ready until well into 2021, we'll be coexisting with the coronavirus for the next year or longer without a magic bullet. And this next phase of the crisis may require us to reset our expectations and awareness and change our behaviors, according to public health professionals. So, Jared, what role do you believe that wellness programs and employers through their wellness programs should play in helping people reset their expectations and awareness and changing behaviors?
I think it plays all of that role. It's a huge issue, and I think if employers don't take it seriously, then we're going to hit a breaking point. Those who don't have access to or feel like there is no resource out there for them may hit those catastrophic breaking points for themselves, and that's unfortunate. We as companies are concerned, they're jumping forward and they're analyzing those behavior risks. They're taking that a lot more seriously. They need a healthy workforce, and healthy nowadays isn't just not running to the ER or having expensive prescriptions. Healthy workforce is, being able to manage your employees while they are not either in the office every day or when you can't be around them and be as involved as you were before. One of the interesting things that I heard a webinar on that topic, was that management and companies who are good leaders to begin with won't have to change their behaviors, because a good manager and a good leader has a lot of trust in their employees. They don't have to be as involved in every single step of the way. And as employees and as employers, are reevaluating the work at home situation. How much can we afford to have our employees work from home maybe once, twice, 3 times a week moving forward as a permanent type of a solution? Some employers may never go back to the everybody in the office every day of the week. Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, depending on how large a company is, I don't think that that's a good idea anyway, especially if we're going to be stuck in this situation for a year or more. So it's interesting to see what those employees and our employers are making those changes for. I think they're going to be moving more, leaning on their providers, whether that be their wellness companies that they've hired or whether that be their broker. And I've seen a major increase in those requests for what do you have available for this. But with those medical carriers taking more of a front and center role, they also realize that they have to expand their programs, that they have to make sure that the resources they have, those condition management programs, those pre-diabetes, those mental health and case management programs that have always been available, are more communicated. You can't just put a flyer up in the lunchroom and call it good. They gotta communicate, and there's a lot of ways to do that that haven't been as utilized as they could. So I think employers are definitely going to be looking to expand those resources, or at least communicating them better. I don't foresee a whole lot of on-site events happening in the near future.
Right.
If we are going to be stuck with this for a little while, the traditional wellness on-site screening and blood test, it might need to be, and who knows where this will go, but it might need to be you go to your doctor on your own time, and then we're going to speak and share those results and build the wellness program around that. It also could be testing at home. Now, I know that those options are out there. In the past, they haven't been utilized. They really, truly were exclusive for the one employee we have in Alaska. You can't go to a Quest Diagnostics and get his blood drawn, and his doctor is 100 miles away. That's who it was for. But now, my doctor is down the street, but he's probably booked up, and will ask me to do my visit over the phone, or an app. So I foresee that to be something that is utilized a lot more and promoted from the employer side.
Yeah, the little home kits are very convenient and they work pretty well. Just prick your own fingers, stick your sample in, and send it back out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting as I have the opportunity to get in front of a lot of CEOs, and I ask them the question, what behaviors or what risks, what health risks do you think represent the greatest increase in medical costs? People will say things like, well, poor exercise or poor diet, or alcohol or abuse of tobacco or things like that. And when you then pull up the studies, for example, the Health Enhancement Research Organization did a study many years ago that was a pretty landmark study that showed that all of those risk factors pale in comparison to uncontrolled stress, and the top one being depression. And so mental health, both depression and uncontrolled stress, are far greater risk factors that turn into medical costs, not just mental health medical costs, but all medical costs. I think most employers are surprised to learn that. And when they learn that, all of a sudden, oh, maybe I need to take more attention and address the mental health prevention. And I think things like the pandemic also accentuate for employers, I need to address this emotional well-being aspect of my company.
Absolutely.
You have a background in data analytics. I didn't know you'd actually had a graduate degree from Johns Hopkins in analytics. Talk a little bit about what you learned in that same realm.
Absolutely. I think it's it's a growing field, and that's one of the things I think is driving the future, is that data. What are we going to do with it? How can we find risks and address them from a preventative viewpoint with the given data that we have? And that's where my experience in education has given me a little bit of a drive and a boost for that preventive measure. In fact, where some of that industry has started, and where some of it, I think, caught my attention, was with diabetes, specifically with type 2 diabetes. There's a national diabetes prevention program that was put out by the CDC, and a lot of state governments and school districts and health systems have tried to adopt that and become certified in that and offer it. And the measure that they use is that you're not diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but the quiz that you take addresses all of those different things that you just mentioned as health risks. What is your current activity, male or female, history of diabetes, weight and waist circumference, those type of things that can predispose you for type 2 diabetes. And the chances of someone who has prediabetes moving to full-blown type 2 diabetes without any behavior modifications is incredibly high. It's somewhere around 80% for someone if they don't do anything in the next 5 years. And that is a very high cost to medical insurance. So it was interesting for me to see the preventive measures. How do we identify that? And I think that the future comes in taking all of those other things that you're talking about, mental health and physical health and behaviors, and finding out what are you at risk for? What do we need to address before it actually becomes a problem? And that's where that data comes in. You know, if we can identify it before it's a problem, it's really, really easy to look after the fact. You know, how many people do we have on the plan who have heart disease? How many people have diabetes? That's really easy to do because it's there. It's already happened. They're already costing a medical plan quite a bit of money. And, you know, that's really, that's all there is. But if we're talking future and we're talking where are we going and what's going to have the most effect, it's how do we identify these things before they become a problem? And the data is out there. You know, the efforts and the studies are being done, and it's a matter of taking that information and putting together predictive analytics that can help to show an employer and an individual, hey, guess what? You are at risk. And here are the things available to you, just like the National Diabetes Prevention Program. They have a very high success rate if you can complete their program. If we can do that for all of those other really problematic areas for personal health, then I think we really have a case for changing the future and putting that responsibility a little bit more on that individual, which is, of course, happening right now as we're all a little bit separated from each other.
Well, let's talk about behavior modification, because like you said, if we don't modify behavior, 80% of those people are going to wind up with type 2 diabetes. Changing behavior is not easy. I think you've heard me say before, I think it's the hardest thing there is to do in healthcare is to modify behavior. Talk a little bit about, from your perspective and from your experience, what are some of the keys and best practices at engaging people in something so difficult as changing behavior?
You know, that's a long conversation. But you know what? I think it's the key. I think it is the key to it. So in one of my previous roles, when I worked for a medical carrier, I was a health coach, and you know, we learned a lot about behavior modification and change, and the trans-theoretical model of behavior change. All of those different things came into play. But what it really came down to is you can't do it alone. And, you know, there's a big difference between being motivated and being inspired. And, you know, there's a lot of motivational tools out there, but motivation is something that's external. Motivation is, you know, the cat poster on the wall that says, you know, that I can reach for the stars. I might feel good about that for a few minutes, and then tomorrow I probably won't remember it. Inspiration is my personal desire, something inside me that says, you know what, it's time to change. It's time to do something new and different. I'm tired of being where I am or what I'm doing or feeling this way. And it's not something that comes out of nowhere. I think one of the most important things out there, and this also is an interesting topic as far as the future trend, is coaching. You know, coaching is something that your company does incredibly well. A lot of companies have offered it. Utilization, it depends on the company, depends on a lot of different factors, but having a coach is almost like that gap that I was talking about. You know, we have the EAP, the catastrophic, the mental breakdown. I'm going to go there when things have really hit the fan. But what about the in between? And when you sit down and you talk with someone who's trained to listen to you and not tell you what you have to do or what you should be doing, they're guiding you, they're letting you create your goals. And guiding you through your thought process. Maybe some of the things that were holding me back were just things I didn't understand. And a coach is a good opportunity to walk through some of those ideas and in my past as a coach, that was one of the most rewarding things, was to hear someone talk circles around their problems, and then all of a sudden you could almost hear it over the phone that the light bulb went off over their head.
The aha moment. Mm-hmm.
And that behavior change is a lot more easily done with a little bit of trained help, and it doesn't technically have to be a psychiatrist or a doctor. You know, that's where I think a lot of the future comes from, is getting that help. You know, bouncing those ideas and talking to somebody, you know, other than, you know, and all respect to it, but somebody other than your family members or spouse, because generally we hear from our loved ones, you know, hey, you'll be fine, you know, you do great, or you get the exact opposite of, you just need to get over it and move on, you know, and that doesn't help you build that motivation to make major behavior changes.
Well, and I love what you said about inspiration and how motivation might be more of an external thing, but inspiration is what's inside. And I truly believe, as you just said, I want to underline the key to getting someone to change behavior is to find what they're inspired to change. Mm-hmm. It's not about prescribing change. It's about finding what that person's inspired to change about themselves. And like you said, give them someone else, like an accountability partner, someone besides, you know, we've got our brains we got that amygdala that just doesn't like to change. And it has so much power over our behavior. Even though our prefrontal cortex, that conscious part of our brain is saying, I want to change, I want to change, I want to change. You bring in that accountability partner is really a support to your conscious brain. You know, someone external to yourself knows you want to make that change, and that can help you overcome the barriers that keep dropping you back into those ruts. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I read a book. It was an interesting analogy to exactly what you're talking about. And they said, you know, you have there's two versions of you. There's the one that is the conscious part that says, I want to make the change. I want to lose a few pounds. You know, I want to be nicer, you know, or more thoughtful or more mindful. And then there's the other part of you that's, you know, a little bit more set in, and that's not your favorite part of yourself. And the analogy in the book was, you know, that the night before a big meeting, you know, you realize, oh, hey, I need to do this, and I need to, you know, I need to remember these papers, and I need to drop this off at the post office. And so you go to bed and you wake up and you think, I don't care. I don't remember what I'm doing. I don't want to do it. You know, go to the gym. No. I may have wanted to do that last night. I don't want to do that this morning. So the suggestion in the book, which I thought was kind of funny, was to take all of that stuff and block your way out the door, so that by the time you get up and you get ready to go, you don't forget, because your good self reminded your bad self of what it was supposed to be doing. And I think that that's kind of the analogy to the coach, is someone there that knows what your wishes are, and they're just there to remind you of what you want.
Exactly, to be that support to accomplish what you want to accomplish. Paul Larson, who's the global director of health for UPMC, was one of our guest panelists a few weeks ago, and he used the analogy, as we described this battle that goes on inside of us, as an elephant and a rider. You know, your conscious brain is the rider, but you're moving an elephant. That amygdala has a lot of power over your behavior, and having someone else to guide the elephant and to help the rider to guide the elephant can be a tremendous influence to get that amygdala to start moving out of the rut. And once you move out of the rut, it's like, okay, now the amygdala is comfortable. It just doesn't like change. And you got to create enough change to where it becomes comfortable to do the change, where now the elephant's moving in the right direction. And that's a good thing. So I truly believe that having an external accountability partner, someone that you can share your goals, your aspirations, your inspiration, who's not going to prescribe change. He's not going to tell you like what you said, you know, it's not about telling someone, okay, well, you know, I'm the doctor, you're the patient, here's your diagnosis, and here's what you need to go do in the way of treatment. That just doesn't work.
That's motivation. That's motivated by fear is what that is. And motivation doesn't last very long.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to just send a shout out to our participants. We've got a number of people on today that I know that some of them are experts in this area. I would love to hear their comments or questions or raise their hand. We can have them join us. But let's take this a little bit further into the employer space. So as employers begin to further appreciate the need to address emotional well-being and are looking for ways to better provide support to their employees, what are some of the suggestions that you suggest employers start with? What are some of the things as a population health manager you do to guide employers, and some of our attendees are employers, to guide them in this movement towards being more mindful of their employees' emotional well-being?
That's a fantastic question. And that's what, that's the space that I live in. I generally tend to ask two major questions, because the two major questions that are going to have the most effect on not only the engagement in such a program or in a resource, but also the tone that an employer takes when they provide those resources. Those two things make a huge difference in how successful it's going to be. Those two questions that I ask is, number one, what is the interest of the company? Because the main focus, the main goal of that company is it needs to align with that vision, with that how that business runs and how employees feel about who they work for. The other question that I ask is, how do your employees feel about it? What do they want? So if we can make sure that those two things align, what a company is interested in, what management wants to offer, and does it align with what your employees are interested in, is going to be the best first approach that we have. That can be done through surveys to employees. That can be done through focus groups, or bringing somebody in from each department and finding out what are your biggest pain points. If we were to offer a specific type of program, how do you think it would be received? And that's generally my very first approach when looking at those type of resources.
Okay. And what do you see as tools that employers can use to do that? What are some of the tools you recommend? Survey Monkey, that kind of thing?
What's that?
Survey Monkey, or some of those, question platforms?
We tend to offer, we've got a Survey Monkey account, and we're happy to help our employers administer those type of things. But as far as tools to do that, we generally lean upon the free resources first. What do your carriers have to offer? What do we have to offer, of course? And if you've got a third-party vendor, what are they doing, and do they have the capability to administer something? Because one of the most important things is that it comes from a voice of care. The second that it comes from an external source,
right.
we tend to find employees that back off and say, wait, who's asking this question? What are you going to do with this information? Mm-hmm. We encourage management and executives to send this out with a note of care, and ask those questions. Hey, we want your input, totally anonymous. Tell us what you need, and then let's, as management, let's sit down and talk about what our employees are struggling with, and base our decisions based off of that. When they do it in the opposite direction, when management sits in an office and they say, our claims are high, we've had a lot of one-off claims that are mental health related. Let's offer this EAP program, or let's offer this mental health program, or even worse is when they say, well, let's just pay our medical carrier for this condition management and coaching program, and that'll fix our problem. And that's not communicated to employees in a lot of cases, or it's that flyer in the lunchroom. It doesn't do any good, because it's not the voice of the employees. And when it comes to mental health specifically, we need to make sure that we're listening We need to make sure that it's coming from a place of care. Mental health is a very touchy subject for a lot of people. You know, if I'm having a major event in my life that's causing me stress, I'm not just going to walk in, to the HR office, sit down, and bare my heart and soul out, because what are they going to do? You know, and there's always that fear of, oh, what is my employer going to think? Is this risking my employment? Is it going to stop me from getting a promotion? Like, there's all those questions, and they shouldn't be questions, because HR is supposed to be coming from a caring position. But as an employee, that's kind of the things that go through your mind. And from the employer perspective, the question should be, how do we help our employees? How do we make them feel comfortable? How do we provide them with the resources that they need without them having all of those negative thoughts and connotations associated with that stigma?
Well, and I couldn't agree with you more that the care and concern from the leadership of the company goes far more than, it really boils down to culture. And culture plays such an important role in the health and productivity of a workforce. Maybe talk a little bit about what you've seen as you work with employers as it relates to culture and tools that are available to help companies improve culture and the impact that culture can often have on the health of workforces.
That's another deep conversation. That's a great one. You know, that's the difference between, me as an employee sitting back and because of the lack of communication and the lack of culture, you go to a hostile work environment. And I think, if the listeners haven't worked at a job where they had that feeling, then they should feel very fortuitous that they haven't had that happen before. But that has to be one of the worst feelings in the world, to think, oh man, what if I go to work, like, my coworkers are doing this and my boss is out to get me, and the company doesn't care, and those type of things. You bring that home. When that happens, there's no separation between work life and family life. That stress, it takes it out of you, and it is detrimental to your health. So, to address your comment of culture, there are a lot of resources out there. We as a brokerage will sit down and do a kind of a culture assessment and talk about where the voice is coming from and what tone of voice that is. Are we providing a wellness incentive, and does it come across in a punitive way? Are you telling me that I have to be healthy or you're going to punish me? Or is it the exact opposite, which can be the exact same program, but it's that message that's portrayed?
Right.
Is it a message that says, hey, we value you, we want you to be healthy, and if you take steps to take care of yourself, we'd like to give you a reward for that? And that's one of the things we address, is that culture starts with tone of voice. We also want to make sure that those executives are involved in that decision. The second that they separate it and say, take care of this, then the employees don't necessarily feel that. And then the whole thing is nobody cares. Well, why should I participate in this? It's what good is it? But when an employer cares and the executives jump in and say, we want you to utilize this because we care. We pay for this because we care. You could have the exact same program, and those two examples I gave will send a completely different message home. Hey, I want to participate in this. This is a great thing that my employer is offering. They care about me. They want me to be healthy. Versus, do you have a wellness program? I don't know. I don't know. A lot of people don't know that they have one, because that executive management is not involved in that decision. It's not built into their culture. It's not built into their vision. And without that, it's dead on the ground. It's dead at the those are a few things we address. And as far as the resources that are available to help culture, there is a number of different organizations out there, the National Wellness Institute, WellCOA. They have a lot of resources on their web pages that talk about the most important things to create a culture of well-being. And they're simple things, you know, setting goals, involving your upper management, following up on the goals, asking the employees, you know, we just did a challenge for drinking water. How did you like that? You know, for an employer to throw darts at a dartboard with their wellness program is another way to guarantee that it's going to fail, because you're not involving yet. You're not listening to their voice. You're not asking the right questions, and you're not reassessing often enough. So.
Right. Well, and in the last few minutes that we have, you brought up incentives. Let's talk a little bit about incentives. This is an area that I feel very passionate about. You probably do too. Incentives, like monetary incentives, recognition, rewards, are excellent at getting people to do simple tasks. If you want someone to do something, whether that's go get your biometric screen, take a survey, participate in a competition or a challenge, people will do simple one-time or simple tasks over a period of time for incentives, but they haven't been proven to be very effective at changing complex behaviors and lifestyles. Address that from your perspective.
You know, that's the golden question. How do we make programs really affect behavior change? And the answer to that is the difference between participation and engagement. Participation is exactly what you described. You can get groups to participate. If that incentive is big enough, people will do anything for it. I've met with many national vendors, and when you bring up the conversation of incentives, immediately they jump forward and say, oh, cash is king, because that's what's going to increase the participation. And that's what, as a third party, wellness company, that's how you can prove your value to your employer, to your client per se. But the engagement conversation is different, and that's where that behavior change comes from. Engagement is tapping into that inspiration, finding out what people are interested in, finding out what drives people, and then associating that with we care. And sure, we're going to give you an incentive, but we care, and you're part of our family here at this business. When those pieces come together and that engagement comes together, then people are participating because they want to. And if you want to participate, then it's not just for the incentive. Generally, what we'll talk about when we sit down with an employer group is a little pie chart that talks about, here's your demographic. You have a certain part of your population that will never participate. It doesn't matter if you offer them $1,000 a year in their HSA. It doesn't matter if the CEO takes them, flies them to a golf course on the beach. They won't participate. They're not going to change. They don't care, right? There's a certain percentage of people that just don't want to. The bottom of that, so the exact opposite of that, is the people who are going to do it without any sort of incentive. The people who are already inspired internally, that they jog every morning, they're competing in these races, they're always packing their lunch to work. That percentage is the population that will always participate, and they will always do it, and it doesn't have to be. The real key is everything in between. That part of the population that, like we were talking about, the part of the brain that wants to do it, the rest of the body isn't ready for it. That's the population that needs to shift from participation to engagement, that needs to feel cared about, and that needs to find whatever that inspiration is that is individual to them. Once we can shift that up, we can address and have a better effect on the engagement of a population, and then hence in the end is going to be actual modifiable behavior change. And that's going to be what's affecting that plan in the end from a personal perspective, as well as from an employer and a cost perspective.
Jared, we're about out of time. That's a wonderful way to conclude today's huddle. I think that puts an exclamation point on today's discussion. Great comments. Thank you so much for participating with us today. I think it's been fantastic. I would like to, in conclusion, just mention that our guest panelists for Wednesday, June 24th will be Bobby Kloss. She's the Director of Human Capital Management Services for Benefit Advisors Network. Bobby will be sharing her thoughts about how employers can be proactive in supporting emotional well-being. We will be sending a post-huddle survey out. Please take the time to respond, to give us your feedback. If you've got any thoughts or ideas for future huddles or themes, please share those with us. Or if you've got recommendations for potential panelists that can join us, please share those with us. You can communicate with us on the Contact Us form on goingonoffense.com. Again, we want to thank Jared today for his participation as our guest panelist. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We also want to thank the organizations that have gotten behind this movement. Please take advantage of the resources, the offers, the discounted services, and many free services that are offered on goingonoffense.com. And we will be posting the recording of this huddle on the website later today. And we'll sign off now and say goodbye and hope you'll join us in an upcoming huddle. Have a good one.